All right, here we are for another episode of Coffee with the Founder. I got my coffee cup here with Flash, 100-yard dash from one of our favorite family movies, Zootopia. And speaking of favorite, we also have one of our favorite friends of the conference, a colleague, a true sister, Dr. Hsiao-wen Lo. I'm so glad that you're here with us. We're doing these coffee talks as a way to introduce people to the WPC family. A lot of folks see you on the main stage, see you do workshops, maybe see you in our carcass group, affinity groups, all of that kind of stuff, but they don't get to know who you are and the wonderful work you're doing long after you leave the conference. So this is a chance to introduce people to the WPC family. So let's pretend I meet you at a bus stop or a train stop or an airport, and I introduce myself and I say, who are you? What do you do? How do you introduce yourself and what you do to people? Can you tell us who we have here with us today?
Okay, so like you said, my name is Hsiaowen, and I am a recently naturalized U.S. citizen, immigrated from Taiwan in 1995, who happens to be a psychologist and stumbled upon WPC in 2007. And I have lived on the land of Kickapoo people, Miami people, Peoria people, Massachusetts people, Wichita people, Oneida people, Haudenosaunee people, Peoria, Meskwaki, Anishinaabe, and Potawatomi people. So that's who I am.
Yeah. Now, just talk to us quickly about this immigration process. I mean, was it, I don't know if easy is the word, just give us a sense of what it took to go from arriving to naturalized citizen.
Okay. So I came here as an international student. So I had my student visa when I was here. And when I was here in Oklahoma pursuing my PhD, I met my now wife. And so I think depends on who you are, what kind of social identities you have, your path to citizenship is going to look different. So at the time, we couldn't get married. So I knew that the only way for me to stay in the country was to secure a work visa, which is then the H-1B. And with that work visa, they will give you 3 years at a time. You get to renew it twice, one time. And then your employer supposedly then will need to sponsor your green card if they intend to keep you employed, which means they can cut you loose after renewing it once. Without any reason. They can just let you go because they decide to not renew your visa, and then you will be you will not have the documentation to stay in this country. But so anyway, so what I did was then that I got the when I was working, I pushed for them to then sponsor my green card because I was not able to get married at the time to a U.S. citizen. So the only way I could then get the citizenship is through employment-sponsored green card. So there was actually 4 ways that you can get citizenship, only 4 ways. And one is, did you know the 4 ways you can get?
No, help us out.
Yeah, so either you have $1 million to invest, or then you married a U.S. citizen, or your job sponsor it, or you have exceptional contribution to the country. Those are the only 4 ways you can become a naturalized citizen.
Yeah.
So I didn't have $1 million, even though I couldn't marry through marriage, and I didn't have the exceptional contribution to the country, so I went for the work visa. So it is through that then I got my citizenship. Or then I get my green card. Once you get your green card, you need to have green card for 5 years before you're eligible to sponsor to apply for citizenship.
Yeah.
So I got my green card in 2009, but I didn't get my citizenship until 2017.
Mm.
For the reason that after 5 years of waiting, and I went to apply for citizenship on the website, what it asked me to do to become a citizenship, it felt so violent that I had to walk away from the site. And that is, it asked me if I was willing, if required by the country, to bear arms, to fight for the country. And I just got so hung up on that sentence because I don't see myself bearing any kind of weapon and killing another life. But then that is what is asked of me, for me to become a US citizen. And I had to sit with that. So it took me 3 more years for me to be ready to go back to the website and go through the process.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know you so well. I feel like I can ask you that because I wouldn't feel comfortable asking that of anyone. And I appreciate that. And I'm only imagining that you hear other kinds of stories of folks wanting to go through this process. I mean, what's your sense of where we are in reference to immigration, naturalized citizenship, and is it different for white people or Latinx folks, Asian Pacific Islander, folks from Africa, the continent? What's your sense of kind of the overall system process when it comes to immigration, naturalized citizen?
I don't want to answer that question for the reason that I think my opinion is not based on data and facts. And my sense is that probably the color of your skin would make some difference, but I also don't want to make any kind of blanket statement.
Yeah,
And
okay.
for me, it was a long process.
Mm, mm.
And for me, so I've been on this land since 1995, so that's 25 years. And so went from a Taiwanese person, that's my social identity, to Asian identity, to then Asian American identity. And then to each stage, it does something different to my psychic. Right? So the word paper means something very different to the Asian community than any other community, and maybe Latinx people too. Like paper is not just a piece of paper or your final paper. Like paper, it means something specific to us. And without that paper, then what that would do to us physically, socially, educationally, professionally, it's profound. And so once I became so that was with me for decades. And then to have to shed that aside and have this new identity of an American citizen, and then that is not something that happens overnight. I have to constantly remind myself that I am okay. Now I have paper, and so that is also taking a few years to get used to. So then those are part of my Asian American experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Thank you. I tell me or talk to us a little bit about white supremacy, white privilege,
Yes.
other forms of oppression. How have you come to grapple with, understand, talk about, explain in the mix of these terms and what they mean to you, how they impact your work? Just when you hear white supremacy, white privilege, other forms of oppression, what are some things that come up for you? How has that been a part of your work, your research, your life experience?
Okay. So Eddie, as I was thinking about this the last couple of days, It took me back to 2007 and 2008, which was my first 2 years attending WPC. And it just took me back to then when, how I felt when I heard those words. And it was so comforting to hear those words at the conference. Because where I was, nobody would talk about it, even though it was everywhere. So I was thinking about that, and then fast forward to now, I was thinking about, so what is my work? How is my work related to white supremacy? And this is what I came up with, is that my work, so when I say my work, I think of it in 3 ways. One is my professional work. So I am a psychologist. And how I am relating my work to white supremacy is to understand it, to name it for my clients, and for them to connect it to their symptoms. So the symptoms can be anxiety, the symptoms can be depression, the symptom can be overeating or purging or substance abuse, right? All those things. And then how is it that the white supremacy is shaping their life, that these are the symptoms? For them to be able to understand that, to name that, and then to heal themselves from it. So that is how I relate my work to white supremacy, and to help them to free themselves. And that is something that I find really interesting, is that even people who are people of color, who are academics, and this is what they do, but there's still that space that is a vacuum, which is that they would talk about microaggression, they'll talk about internalized oppression, they will talk about generational trauma, but they still haven't had the space and time to really connect that with their own personal experience. And so that is where I come in, is to provide every hour a week, provide that space for them to be able to make that connection, and for them to truly heal and liberate themselves from it. And so that's one way that my work is related to white supremacy. The second way is that, so this is something that I think I would credit my experience at the WPC, is that one thing I think about is that when I go back, what is it that I can bring back to my community? And so 10 years ago, I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And at the time, then it's through different just factors that I then got connected. Just right after I came here, I got connected to a group of people, local people, community people, who want to talk about race. And because of my prior experience with intergroup dialogue, then so they want me to be the trainer of their facilitators. And so this is something that I do in my community, that we offer race dialogue. It is free, and I believe what comes from the community go back to the community, in the sense that this is our 10th year. We have a budget of 0. So these facilitators come from the community. They volunteer their time. I volunteer my time to train them. And then we ask for space in the community that is willing to host us. And then we go there. And then we will have a dialogue series of 8 weeks, and we talk about race. And that is my other way for us to be able to name white supremacy that is happening in our community, that's connecting it to our personal experience, and then how that show up in ourselves and in the community. And then that's my other way that I work with white supremacy. Yeah. So I like that work because it's very local, and I feel very grounded, that I'm able to bring something that every year that I learned from wherever we go, and I bring it back and then plant it there, yeah, and then watch it grow. So that's my third way, the second way that I connect to white supremacy. And then the third way, which is newer, and that is my groove. So groove is a dance movement experience. And I like that because, for one thing, I sit a lot because of my job. And so I need something that will get me moving. And my work, it does a lot of analytical thinking. It is a lot of verbal ability that's going on. And so with group, with dance, with music, it allows me to tap into a different part of me. And I love that. I'm also using that. I don't know if you read that book. It's called My Grandmother's Hand, I think. It was written by also a mental health professional, a person of color, I believe. And then he talks about a lot about how the trauma is in our body. And so group is another way, the nonverbal way that I help people work through the impact of white supremacy.
Mm.
So those are the three ways that I work towards dismantling it.
Now, I'm not going to ask you to show me any groove moves.
Oh, not on this episode.
But can you give us a sense of where groove comes from for folks who may have never heard of it or know nothing about it, and how often you do it? Can you give us a sense, a little bit more about groove?
Sure. I learned about it through Facebook because I was looking up how to salsa. And Facebook, they know what you're doing. And then so they send this advertisement about groove, and just out of curiosity, I click on it. It came out of the World Groove Movement, and it's designed by a lady named Misty. And it was also her, people can Google it and learn more about it. But the idea is that she realized that for a long time, she loves to dance, but she danced for people. And then it was during one of her purging episodes. So she had bulimia. And it was waking up from her own vomit and blood. She was asking herself, is this as good as it gets? And it's through some soul searching, she realized how much trauma that she also inherited in her body. And then from that, she decided to dance for herself. And that's how groove was born. It was very liberating. And then what I love about it is that it's put us back in charge. Mm. So the aerobic classes, like the instructor is in the front, and then we model after them, right? And we have our own space, and we just move in that space. But groove is 360 degrees. The whole floor is yours, and you share it with everybody else. And then each song, you get 2 movements or rhythms, and then everybody dance it their way. So we're still united, but it allows our personality to come through. So I really love that combination. And she's very encouraging of moving your body for yourself and not for other people. And allow your mind to be free, right? Society teaches us, if you are a Black man, you gotta show up a certain way. If you're an Asian woman, you gotta show up a certain way. That's how white supremacy is also controlling our mind and controlling our body. That's not where Misty was going, but that's where I'm going with this gift that she is giving me. Mm. And so I combine that with white supremacy because I know how it impacted me physically, viscerally, right? And so I'm using groove to then liberate myself and to empower myself. So that's what I do.
Now, did you feel comfortable the first groove session? I mean, how long did it take you to feel like you could really move to the groove?
Actually, so that is interesting you ask that, Eddie. I always thought of myself that I couldn't dance. And now thinking back, I think I was a closeted dancer. Like I could dance, but my culture tells me that I can't and that I shouldn't, that it's only for certain people, right? But her very first video, it was only 3 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. And my body is my own. Like my hand is my own, and I can do something with it. And that is called dancing. You know, so for me, it's right that. but it will take different people, different lanes to feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned a couple words, white supremacy, trauma. I think often people assume people know what they mean. But I'm going to ask you, when you define white supremacy, how do you define that? And the same for trauma. How do you define that for people? What's your definition of that, white supremacy and trauma?
So trauma, I will use it in the clinical sense, is that when it's something that we witness or we experience that is causing us severe bodily harm or psychological harm, then that is a trauma. White supremacy, then I will use the very common ones is and then the superiority of white people, although I go beyond that. So I think white supremacy is not just about race, it's about class, it's about sexual orientation, it's about religion, it's about ability, all those things. That is all wrapped up in that white supremacy, is that one group of people is more superior than the others. That's how I would define it.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about how you've been able to respond or deal with COVID-19 being named and associated with the API community.
Mm-hmm.
So one, how have you had to kind of just process that? And have you or colleagues or friends or family members had to experience that in the general public? And what's your sense about how we can be allies or be advocating in a different way? As I believe by doing this, this has been creating more division and possibly more trauma in our society.
Eddie, I actually did not pay him any mind when he said that, because not to minimize it, but because I don't want to be distracted by it. I experienced racism the first year after I set foot on this land. This is nothing new, right? What he said is not anything new. It had always been there for centuries. And I don't want to be distracted by that. I don't care if he apologized for it. What I have been doing to dismantle white supremacy before COVID-19 will be the same thing during and after. And I am the only person in my family that's in the United States. So I don't have any family member that was suffering from this. And I don't have any clients who are in that community that have reported anything. So that is my personal experience. Although I know a lot of Asian Americans are directly or indirectly impacted by this.
Yeah, so if some of those folks are listening, watching, and need someone to offer some words of comfort, words of wisdom, whether it's a high school kid, a young college student, or a parent or an adult of some kind, what would be your words of advice or suggestions to folks that may be having to deal directly with some of the impact of the president and others naming COVID-19 and associating COVID-19 with China, and I think sweepingly with other Asia Pacific Islander folks?
I would say, however your reactions are, they are valid. Take care of yourself and reach out. Build a support system if you don't already have one to get through this. You're not crazy.
So how are you doing during this quarantine time? Impact are you seeing or possible effects, if any, quarantine is having on you, your family, but also I'm wondering if you got a sense of the community, Ann Arbor, the larger community where you're living and folks you're working with. How are folks doing in reference to quarantine?
For me, I live on the outskirts of Ann Arbor, and I have about 2 acres. So I live in the country. So I am not very much in the middle of the whole craziness. I am fortunate that I'm one of those people that I could use this time to slow down and to reflect. Initially, there was some guilt over that. But then I was thinking, each one of us has a different experience. I don't have to act like I am in a storm when it really isn't a storm for us, for me. And so I wouldn't call it a sprinkler, but it certainly is having some impact, and I would deal with that and then see what it is that it afford me to do. If it afford me to slow down, I will slow down. It affords me the ability to reflect, I will reflect. And so that when the crisis is over, because then it's not done, there's then a lot of repairment that needs to happen, right? And so then I am prepared to then help people heal and then move through. So that's how I see myself doing that part. Yeah. So for me, the most impact is that I don't see clients face to face anymore, and then we move it online. And so that was that learning curve for me. And then now I am staring at a screen at least 6 hours a day, which I am not used to. So I have to then adjust to that and think about how do I take care of myself so I can sustain my effort, so I can continue to help people. Because for a lot of people, it's not just pandemic, it's they were already exhausted, tired, harassed, attacked, and then we are adding pandemic on top of it. So it's all that I'm still continue to support them through and then continue to help them navigate it. And I know that this is gonna be ongoing, right? Yeah. So that's what my last 4 weeks have been like.
So are you totally out of the university setting and just doing private clients 100%?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So I don't rely on nobody. On my own cost, call my own shots, provide my own health insurance.
Yeah. I always like to say I'm the best boss I ever had. So
I'm sure you are.
Can you just talk about how you became a psychologist? Is this what you dreamed of doing someday? Can you just talk a little bit about how you found your passion, the work that you do, and the love for that work?
Eddie, I think I probably had always been a quote-unquote activist at heart. And I think part of it probably was influenced by my father. And I remember, so when I was little, so he came from a family where when he was a child, he only had 1 egg once a year. It's that level of poverty that he came from. And I remember, and then I'm very fortunate that my childhood, I never had to worry about food or shelter. That's what he gave me. And I remember loving stories, and I remember when we were summertime, he would take us back to, I have a brother, to his village. And then after dinner, because it's hot, and after dinner, we will move out from the house into the yard where there was a tree. It's the front yard. And neighbors will come by, and my aunt was the one that would prepare tea and little trees. And then, it's kind of a community hub. And then as a child, I would hear stories. And I remember this time that I heard they were talking about auntie so-and-so. We're not blood related, but auntie so-and-so, her husband has started drinking again, was gambling, and haven't come home for 4 or 5 days, and then left her with 4 or 5 kids. And then adults gossip and all that. And then next day, my dad will wake me and my brother up and then say, we're gonna go visit auntie so-and-so. And then on our way there, we will stop by the market, and then he will buy some chicken, some fruits, and then go see her. At the time, I didn't know all that was going on, but it was until I was old enough that I was thinking about it, is then that stories, for him, stories, it informs action, right? We didn't just go see or visit, pay her a visit, auntie so-and-so a visit. He went there to bring food for her and the family. So I think that is really deep ingrained inside of me. And so when I came to the States, really what I wanted was to get a master's degree in teaching English so that I could go back to Taiwan and then teach high school students. Not because I want to teach English, but because I want to work with this specific set of students that are neglected, abandoned by the education system because they weren't making good grades. I want to help the underprivileged. At the time, I didn't have that vocabulary, but that's what I wanted to do. But you know how life was never how we planted it. So I was getting that master, then I stumbled upon counseling psychology. And I was like, this would help prepare me better to do what I wanted to do. So then I went on and got another master in counseling psych and then get my PhD in it. And then I met my wife and then decided to stay. So I am not working with teenagers, and I'm not working with teenagers in Taiwan, but I found a different path, and I think I'm still doing what I have always wanted to do, just with a different group of people.
Yeah. So what's next? I mean, as you look at the next 10 years, let's say, of your life and life's work, what's on the horizon? What do you think about in reference to what's cooking? What are you excited about in reference to the future?
That's a very big question. And Eddie, I only have a very small hope. And that is that I can be as connected to the land as I could, and continue to be as kind as I can to people and to the land.
Do you foresee any kind of challenges emerging from COVID-19? I'm wondering, like, because people ask me all the time, how am I doing, right? And I'm so customarily used to saying, oh, I'm doing great, I'm healthy, so on and so forth. But really, I don't know, Doc. I have no idea how to assess how I'm feeling during this time. So that's number one. If you were advising people on how to take notice or inventory or get a sense of how you're doing, here's some ways to do that in reference to being inside, as long as we've had to be inside, so to speak. And do you anticipate that people being inside for this long is going to have an impact on the long term in reference to how we are, how we're interacting, how we're thinking about one another?
Eddie, I think for sure this is gonna change us, all of us. How, I don't know, but I think the answer is in which every one of us. How do I speak for myself? How do I want to be changed by this? And only you can answer that for yourself. And then collectively, then we will see how we are changed as a nation.
Mm.
And I certainly hope it is something better than we have so far.
Mm.
Right?
So
I will share a quote that I saw, and then this relates to what we are talking about just now. It's by Sonia Renee Taylor, and she said, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, and hoarding, and hate and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We're being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And that's what I am working towards. And I hope a lot of us will be working towards that.
yeah, I'm gonna ask you to send us that quote because we want to post that with your interview. What is amazing to me is when we're in these kinds of times, the kind of people they call on TV and ask them to give their recommendations or perspectives, you know, like Dr. Phil or Dr. Oz. I wish they'd call Dr. Hsiao-wen Lo and say, Doc, what's your advice? So I'm calling you. I mean, we got a group of people I think will be watching this, and I'm wondering, again, if you were to give them any piece of advice as we close out here about being healthy and productive during this time, what's your piece of advice to folks?
Eddie, I don't necessarily think of myself as an advice giver.
These are some difficult times, Doc. We need you here. We need you here. And I know it's a sweeping, big question, but I'm just wondering if we needed you to advise all those listening, what are some pieces of advice that you would give as we anticipate at least another 30 days in quarantine, but possibly another 90 days?
Okay, I'm gonna give it my best shot. It's an indirect way to answer that question. And this is what it is that, so this, I can only speak for myself, my experience in this, is that I ask myself what kind of world I want to see. And I want to see a world that there's more understanding and more patience and more compassion. I also know that doesn't come from nowhere, right? So if I don't understand more, if I'm not more compassionate, I can't expect that to be in my world. So that's the indirect, and the direct way is that if any advice is that I hope every one of us will be more loving. It sounds cheesy, but really that's what we need right now as a species to be able to survive this. And then so reach out, because we're not human. We don't survive on our own. We need a pack to survive. So this is all we got. So tap into that and take care of each other and take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate
that's the best I can give now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I want to close out in a little fun way. We're collecting recommendations for TV shows or movies because I think this time, sometimes, even for the non-TV watcher, we found a little extra time on our hands. So is there anything you've watched that you've enjoyed that has taught you anything, or anything that you have watched that just kind of take you away? Is there any recommendation, suggestion you would give that we can add to our list?
Yeah. I have to disappoint you, Eddie. I don't watch TV. And I'll tell you why. Because I realized that's how white supremacy was downloaded into my brain.
Mm.
And as soon as I learned that, because the first 10 years of my life, I had to learn a new culture, a new language, and TV was my sole source.
Mm.
But I realized that's also where I got all that shit. So as soon as I learned that, I stopped watching it.
Mm.
So I don't have any recommendation. When I unplug, I unplug. So I grow my own vegetables. I make my own bread. I even make my own tofu, my own sauerkraut, my own soap. So when I unplug, I unplug.
So
you have to find somebody else to give you that list of recommendations. Sorry.
well, you mentioned the book, My Grandmother's Hand.
Yeah.
Is there another reading you would suggest? Anything you would suggest I could add?
So 2 books that I keep going back to, and it's Dr. King's book. One is that, what is it called? So one is that Where Do We Go From Here?
Mm-hmm.
The other one is Strength to Love.
Great. Well, we'll add that on your list as a non-TV movie and watcher.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take it. Well, listen, Hsiao-wen, we really appreciate you giving us a little deeper insight to your knowledge, your love, your compassion, your soap making, your tofu making, everything. It's been great to spend some time with you. And as long as you'll be a part of the WPC family, we will take you. And thank you for your years of supporting me and the conference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you too, Eddie.
Sending you love. Take care of yourself. Be safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.